Coming to our afternoon panel. Saw a lot of dialogue and discussion on the floor. I'm glad that we were able to stir it up over lunch with a great presentation by General Cardone. And very pleased to see the number of our uniformed service members and joint service members down on the floor. Hopefully they're asking the tough questions and learning. I'm sure they're learning quite a bit from our presentations and our technology demonstrations downstairs. What we'll do this afternoon in the next panel is talk through perspectives as it relates to a kind of a government look on cyber convergence. You heard two definitions already, one from General Fogarty, one from General Cardone on cyber convergence. Both of them had to go to their own dictionaries and their own experience to do that. I'm certain that you'll hear some other discussion and focus on what that means from an industry perspective. You'll see we have a mixed panel of government and industry up here. It's our attempt to make sure that that's a dialogue and ability to not just talk from one point of view. I think we'll get some good help with our panel here, and particularly with our moderator, General Red Hernandez, Lieutenant General retired Army, who was the first Commanding General of Army Cyber Command. We're very pleased to bring him back to Gordon and allow him to introduce our panel that we have for you this afternoon. General Hernandez has great experience. I knew him when he was director of OPM, and I was trying to get people assigned to a division. I recall that. But he was also very involved in the training mission in Saudi Arabia and in Central Command that he was working there for diligently, and then as the Assistant G357 for our Army. Moved on to be the first cyber commander, as I mentioned, with good educational background and great experience in our military. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator to the stage as he introduces the panel.
All right, thank you, Bob, for reminding me how old I am. So what a conference. Let me just say that if you were here this morning, that you ought to set your expectations a lot lower, because I don't think any panel can match what we've already heard. But I'm proud and excited to be here, particularly to see all the progress that has been made and a full appreciation of the way ahead and the tremendous leadership that's driving this. So I know I'm ready for today. We'll find out about the panel in a minute. So my ready today gets easy. I have no slides, and I got a haircut. So I'm excited to be with you today for this government perspective on cyber convergence. And let me start by thanking AFCEA for making this conference possible and for your continued commitment to national security. I want to thank the industry, academia, and government partners that are here for the week, for all you do for our collective security. And before I introduce the panel, I want to provide a few opening remarks to set the stage for the discussion. Probably some broader points with respect to cyber convergence, since it's a government perspective, than we heard in the other speakers' clear vision and way ahead. But many of the points, I believe, reinforce or echo their comments. Now, I have to admit that I too went to Webster, and it appears as though we've all been issued the same one. And I would offer the definition of convergence for you to consider as a part of this discussion as moving towards a union or coming together, but really the second one is more appropriate, and that is the merging of distinct technologies, industries, or devices in a unified whole. And you're all a part of that convergence. So what does cyber convergence from a government view mean when you think about it in these terms? When in the end, the government needs to leverage technology for all operations, regardless of what mission they've been given. And I believe there are several aspects of cyber convergence that are driving this transformational change and have significant implications for the government and national security. This includes a short list. First, the growing convergence of land and cyberspace domain, or the physical and virtual world that we live in, operate in every day. Nothing happens on land that's not impacted by cyber, and the reverse is true. Our constant presence in both domains in a network-connected world highlights this growing convergence and the absolute requirement to merge more, not less, into a unified whole. Second, time and space convergence is made possible by technology. Through cyberspace, everything is happening in real time, which significantly impacts our ability to pass timely, relevant, accurate information in order to make decisions and create effects to achieve results. Converged networks, data, platforms, and organizations will allow us to use time and space to our advantage across the government. Third, the convergence of threats and technology empowers asymmetric advantage against forces and enables actions to potentially impact not only ops, but critical infrastructure and national security. Here we must prevent this from occurring, and our own convergence must stay ahead of the threat. Cyberspace, EW, electromagnetic spectrum, and information operations are also converging, as you've heard. Code utilized across the spectrum can integrate a wide range of capabilities to support synchronized operations from the national to the tactical edge. And this is integral to ensure we have a warfighting platform, as is the convergence of defense and offensive operations to ensure one informs the other to enable success. The best defender must think like an attacker. Infrastructure and capabilities aligned with strategy and plans will enhance national security and increase deterrence. By definition, cyberspace domain is part of the information environment, and they too are converging. Nearly all information today is digitized of any relevance, and the ability to rapidly turn this data into information and then knowledge in order to produce actionable intelligence is key to unprecedented situational awareness in real time at all levels. In fact, this is the information environment converging with the operational environment to achieve dominance. Finally, the convergence of operational and institutional activities is rapidly accelerating. Each impacts the other and has the potential to inform everything we do in our institutions to ensure the success of all our operations. To me, cyber is code used to influence others or the machines they use. And in the end, national security depends on our ability to meet the challenges of cyber convergence. Today, our panel members will provide their views on several of these aspects. They're all deeply engaged in taking advantage of the opportunities while working hard to overcome the challenges of cyber convergence. I'd ask you to start teeing up your questions for them. Today we have with us today first Colonel Jennifer Buckner. She reminded me we seem to meet on these panels about once a year. Today she's the Cyber Commandant of U.S. Army Cyber Center of Excellence and the former commander of 780th MI Brigade, where I had the privilege to watch her in action daily as she built a cyber force trained and ready to conduct cyber operations. She brings her operational experience to the institutional force is in the middle of a wide range of cyber convergence topics. Next to her is Mr. Gary Martin, PEO for C3T. Gary spent decades delivering information and communications technology to soldiers and forces. He's focused on bringing comms, networks, and systems that are required to ensure information dominance on the battlefield. Gary understands that in today's world, everything is on the net and knows well the challenges to ensure material integration for our networks, systems, and our platforms. Next to Gary is Mr. Jim Kraft, Deputy Director for the Information Enterprise Management and CIO to the Joint Improvised Threat Defeat Agency. He'll give us a lesson on the acronym for that shortly. DoD's newest combat support agency. He fully appreciates the work required to ensure mission-critical information is visible, accessible, and understandable to authorized users in a trusted environment. Jim also understands what's required from a whole-of-government and coalition approach to enhance cyber convergence and to stay ahead of a rapidly evolving and adapting threat. On the end is Ms. Rosemary Wenchel, Acting Assistant Secretary for Cyber Infrastructure and Resilience Policy for the Department of Homeland Security. Through a wide range of experiences, she understands many aspects of cyber convergence, including the need for strong public-private partnerships at home and internationally, as well as the powerful relationship required between intelligence, information operations, and cyber operations. She knows what it takes to align strategy, plans, and policy to achieve outcomes. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Colonel Jennifer Buckner to get started. Now, we said 3 to 5 minutes, which if you add that up is 8, and we'll have you tell us if they get to 10, and we'll move to the next speaker.
Get a gong. Okay, great. Thanks, sir. Dominate the domain, ladies and gentlemen. I get to open today with the motto of the new cyber branch. Since last year at this time, we were still talking about it, but this year, what a difference a year makes, and we come to the table with the new cyber branch, who are all about dominating the domain. And a public opportunity to thank AFCEA for the platform and the connections that TechNet allows for us here at Fort Gordon, here for the Cyber Center of Excellence, and certainly for the CSRA. I feel like last year, just like General Fogarty, it's all a blur within the first couple of days and weeks of our assignments here. And I feel like many of you in the industry gave us so many good ideas, but I really lacked the bandwidth to kind of move those forward. So my most exciting announcement here this year is we have a team at the Cyber School. I'll introduce my two senior civilians, Todd Boudreau, the Deputy Commandant, and Tom Barnes, the Director of Training. So many of the good ideas they're the people who are actually implementing many of your good ideas these days. And I would highlight that Tom also comes from the operational force, just relocating from DC here to Augusta to be a part of what we're doing here at the Cyber Center of Excellence. So I'll certainly reinforce General Fogarty's remarks this morning in terms of coming a long way in a year. And certainly Convergence speaks to the vision of the Cyber School. Although I tend to look at it more like we're in the implementation of Convergence, so I view it as this aspiration, not an end state, and I'm not quite sure what it looks like until I see it. The guidance for the branch, again, was really elegant in its simplicity. Build a branch capable of missions across the spectrum of offensive cyber operations to defensive cyber operations, from the strategic to tactical levels. So, of course, building upon the significant investments, mainly by Signal and MI Corps over the last decade, and what is in some cases been a competing environment. Today we have those 3 branches and those 3 corps that operate together, but also with our own single disciplines that are all better together. So this past year, in terms of Convergence, we've focused on the cyber branch, Career Management Field 17, which in its first phase focused somewhat narrowly on that convergence of OCO and DECO and a mission force that can operate within that spectrum. So that is also narrowly focused on a customer, and that's Army Cyber Command and Cyber Command's Cyber Mission Force. So predominantly we've had the Signal Corps building, operating, maintaining networks, and we've had Intel over here concentrated on the offensive side. So I like to say with the cyber branch, we've taken the core elements of those specialties and combined them into the foundational training for our new cyber officers. So these are certainly separate but complementary mission sets. And it's really mostly at the strategic and operational level. And right now, all of our students go to our cyber, so just phase 1. There are still many phases to go, but we start with phase 1, and completely appropriately, we start with second lieutenants, because we know that's where the future of the force resides. We know from experience that some of our best leaders, operators, planners in the space have been signal specialists with experience in information assurance directorate of NSA. Network engineering informed by intelligence, and also with input into collection requirements. And this combination of defensive skill sets with intelligence makes for pretty good people who know how to conduct offensive operations. They've been quick learners, and they've been very devious in a good way. And vice versa, when we've brought intelligence skill sets to the defensive side, they have been far more effective because it's easier to protect against something or someone rather than trying to protect against everything. So our curriculum is reflecting that. Intel, Signal, some cyber mission force specific training, but certainly we value all of those inputs to our new leaders. So this year, we're turning our attention to electronic warfare and the convergence, as you heard this morning, of cyber electronic warfare, Signal, Intel, intelligence operations, as integrated with fires and operations. So effective this year, the Electronic Warfare School at Fort Sill will fall under the Cyber Center of Excellence, and we look forward to some of the opportunities that we have to train these mutually complementary forces. I would also add a note about the convergence of our operational and institutional forces, and I think both general officers this morning spoke to that. The idea that we have ready access to the operational experts and can rapidly integrate their lessons learned into the instruction, and in fact can have them teaching the latest and greatest, I think speaks to the goodness that we're achieving here at Fort Gordon with co-location. And then a final note on Reserve and National Guard, because our approach in this space has really been component agnostic. We are training to a joint standard, we are training to a cryptologic standard, and while the school is prioritized and focused first on this Cyber National Mission Force or Cyber Mission Force personnel, certainly the training looks the same no matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing. And of course, just like we're focused narrowly on the Cyber Mission Force first, within the Reserve and National Guard forces, we'll focus on the cyber protection teams that they are building, because while we are training a branch, we are also training joint work roles. So to be honest, we don't care what MOS or specialty you are, you can be whatever MOS, but on that cyber protection team, we train you to a joint work role. I always like to use these venues to publicly highlight our differentiation, because it's no accident that our first officers are second lieutenants. And again, our future rests with them. I'll reinforce General Cardone's remarks. They are trained and employed jointly from their first assignment. They will be leaders for our Army, but they will also be leaders within that joint force that they spoke to. And so they won't know anything different in cyber but a joint force. And I would also highlight that the Army has taken a little different approach to this. We are the only service to really change our institutional and training development platforms to accommodate this mission set, because the other services are still using comms, intel, and a combination of those things. So certainly they're specially managed, but they're still specially managed within a much larger pool of people. And we think, as General Cardone said, this is kind of the right narrow mission set to train them and to develop them and to use them. If I could quickly summarize some naysayers to convergence in the school space, it would be that we're somehow undermining the core technical competencies of all of these single disciplines. And I always want to push back passionately, because I don't think anything could be further from the truth. We are a branch that values technical competence, not just technical competence, but really superiority. So we are setting up structures that both enable and demand specialization in these single disciplines, but also place a priority, and the only way you're value added to a team is your integration and synchronization with all of those other disciplines. So we really look to the cross-discipline or cross-functional utilization of all of these things rather than single discipline applications. And I will close by reinforcing General Cardone's observation about our junior personnel and how they don't think in the stovepipes that some of us have grown up with. And all you have to do is talk to one of our lieutenants, and they will start talking about capabilities. They don't think, well, that's I/O, so that's not my job, or that's electronic warfare, so that's not. They just think in terms of access, platform, and effect. That's all they care about, and we are emphasizing that they will be able to do all those things as part of a team by, with, and through others. So I like to talk about cyber with a capital C. Like, we think of maneuver, infantry, and armor. We think of fires as ADA and FA. We think of cyber as a team sport, intel, signal, electronic warfare, I/O, space, fires, all of those things. We are part of the team. Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. Gary, please.
Okay, let me take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about what we're doing on the acquisition side. And I would say that the construct that General Fogarty painted this morning is the most coherent diagram I've seen in terms of where the convergence of things that go on, and particularly on the material development side, needs to go. There are a number of things in that diagram that we are working on today. If you look at the circle in the box, really inside the TOC, outside of a skiff large enough to hold everybody and get in the clearances, there is a convergence of a material solution that's going on today, and that is really on the apps, the servers, the infrastructure that enables the consolidation of data into this unified data capability. We're doing that today under the Common Operating Environment, the Command Post Computing Environment. Version 1.0, which is really an interim step to that end state, is available today. It's in test. We're working our way towards the end state as depicted on that diagram, which for us is really what we call 3.0, which will be available in the 2017-2018 timeframe. The transport convergence, I saw Scott Long here earlier. Scott's been after transport convergence, at least for Ops and Intel, since I've known him in the 90s. This is Trojan Spirit and WIN-T as the principal transport mechanisms. Today, we have actually demonstrated tunneling the TS network through the WIN-T system, so technically it works. We can deliver this capability. Now, if you look at where we distribute these assets today, if we replaced the Trojan Spirits, there are about 63 or so locations where there isn't a WIN-T terminal. And so obviously you can't simply say turn everything over on WIN-T today. We'd have to figure out those locations that would still remain on Trojan or have to replace them. But the technical solution is viable and it's been demonstrated. NetOps is another piece. Today we have NetOps fragmented, at least for the tactical network. There's a NetOps solution for WIN-T. There's a separate NetOps solution for the tactical radios. Many of the ops capabilities, log and so forth, don't really have a NetOps capability. They're VSAT terminals and the networks are essentially up. And so there is no integrated NetOps for the entire network that would allow this convergence. We are working on the lower tactical internet, the radios, and the WIN-T systems to be integrated as we bring the joint network management solution for the tactical radios from the JTRS program office. And those are being merged in the same, in fact, as we speak today, they've been consolidated into the same office and are now being converged as a common tool. The challenge, though, is if you really look at operationally, and if you take the network we have today, it's fairly complex. I was at the 101st yesterday, and so their signal company has 35 soldiers. And we're essentially asking this small group of 35 folks to initialize, manage, maintain, operate, defend a network that is growing in complexity as we put more capability out to include down at the dismounted soldiers. Today, just to protect the network, a lot of our protection today comes in the form of encryption. It comes in the form of ensuring that we're patching against emerging threats. And then, of course, there's the host-based security system for defending our operations. But at the end of the day, those individually, they're complex. And we really haven't made it easy enough for the soldiers to really do that very easily. If you take, for example, AEVA patching, there's not one single place where brigade commander can go today where his 6 can go and get all the patches he needs for his brigade's worth of equipment. Some of them he's got to go to CCOM because those systems are in sustainment. Others he goes through our primes because we're still fielding it. In other cases, they're going through our single interface portal in the PEO, and those are just ours in C3T. There are many other systems out there, AMDUs and a variety of other things. So we really have to bring the integration of these capabilities into one place. A brigade commander can go to one place, find out what he needs to patch, and then automate that patching process. We've got 2 pilots today that we're working with Netcom, Software Center at CCOM, and the PEO to try to look at pushing automated patching to our tactical warfighting systems. Today we're on about a 120-day cycle for patching. In an environment that is as agile as a cyber threat, that won't cut it. And so we've got to fix that and automate that. And we're working hard to do that. Network initialization. It takes a lot to bring this network up. We lose sight of the fact that in post-camp and station, and it's the same stuff we're putting in these shelters. It's routers and switches and pretty much the same commercial stuff you would see in your own post-camp and station. And you've got an army of folks, the NEC, and you've got desktop support and a variety of other folks that keep that stuff running. That's very complicated when you package them up in vehicles and you bring them up periodically. It's not on steady state working all the time, and so the skill sets erode and so forth. And so we're working very, very hard to automate the initialization of these systems. We've significantly simplified the soldier node extension, which goes into the commander's vehicle. no signal soldiers with it. And so now they can actually turn it on with one switch and all the initialization occurs. We've got a lot of work to do on the tactical radios, and we've got some work coming over the next year to simplify and automate getting the IP addresses loaded into the radios. You're talking hundreds of radios for a BCT. Today, you touch all of them one at a time and load their data sets. And God forbid you got to go back and rekey them. That's all today done one at a time. So in the next year, we'll be deploying over-the-air reprogramming and rekeying, which will go a long way to simplify that. And then the last part is authentication. If you go into Tactical Operations Center today, every application has a password logon. And so there's no CAC-enabled PKI. It's all fat finger it in. Whenever you leave it up to the soldier to control their own destiny and passwords, you find a lot of things happening. Default passwords, simple passwords. And so all of that stuff's got to be buttoned up. And so we're working hard on tactical PKI and trying to bring that out and roll it out to the force. We actually have a CPD now that's been put in place on tools. Part of defending the network is being able to see the network. And cyber situational awareness is one of the emerging requirements from a new development capability. And so we now have resources starting next year to go after some of those capabilities on the defense side, with Cyber SA being the primary one. From a long-term perspective, our entire network relies on spectrum and the entire electromagnetic environment, whether it's satellite-based or line-of-sight radios or directional radios. All of that requires spectrum and a lot of it. And of course, if any of it's denied, then you start having issues with the network. And so there's a lot of work that's been going on in CERDEC to try to look at the convergence of hardware for both comms and electronic warfare. If you take the cover off a radio today, a software-defined radio, and take the cover off a crew device, you couldn't tell the difference. If you're peeking inside, it's wideband Agile RF, it's software-defined, reprogrammability. And so now the real issue is how do you converge some of this stuff so you've got RF that's very aware of its environment and can sense it? Because quite frankly, if someone's going to break into your network from an RF perspective, right now our radios aren't configured to even detect that. So the work that they're doing in their labs right now has actually brought the RF and has converged that into a common platform. Very, very powerful. And I think we've got a couple years to go to get that productized, but I think it'll be very powerful. A couple of challenges. We talked a little bit about the acquisition process. It's not agile. If you've ever worked in it, most of you have, it's probably the most complicated process known to mankind. Not agile enough for cyber and the pace at which cyber threats will continue to develop. So we've got to find a way to get after this. Some of this will be changing the way we acquire things, open standards and standards-based, so that we can bring capabilities that not necessarily full systems, but integrated capabilities will certainly go a long way. And then, of course, our ComSec management is one of our key challenges right now. We've got 500,000 SINGARS radios, all of which have a emerging challenge with regards to crypto monetization. I'm not sure the Army's got enough money to do that, so anybody in the industry has got an idea on how to do ComSec mod much more quickly on some of the legacy products. I'd love to hear from you. So I'll stop here and wait for the questions.
Great, thanks, Gary. Jim, please.
Well, good afternoon. I want to start off, before you get to ask us questions, ask you a question. How many people here have ever heard of the Joint IED Defeat Organization? Raise your hand up high. All right. Okay. How many people here know that that organization, JIADO, doesn't exist as JIADO anymore? All right. So obviously there's an education point here right now. It's now a combat support agency, the Joint Improvised Threat Defeat Agency, JIDA. Now what I'd like you to do, just so we get this straight, because there's a lot of confusion, say everybody at once, JIDA. No, a little bit more enthusiasm here, JIDA. All right, so now you know how to pronounce it, you know what it is. We are an organization, we're still doing the IEDs, we're still giving the capabilities we've done over the years. It saves so many soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen and civilians' lives. But now, because of the success we've had, we've actually survived a transformation. We've been moved under AT&L, okay, so we report to Mr. Kendall, and We've been broadened to any of the improvised threats that, get tossed in our wheelhouse. So for example, we're leading efforts across government for tunneling and dealing with issues related to tunneling. Our job is to help the warfighter adapt. And that's what convergence is really, the core issue is we're going to have to adapt. One of the things that happened is in order to survive as an organization, JIDA had to converge. In the last 3 years, we've cut our IT costs by over 75%. We've reduced our IT staff by over 66%. Okay, we've reshaped the workforce. We originally had 9 GS-15s. We now have 1. Okay, it gives you a real thing. And what I want to point to is when General Fogarty spoke, he mentioned that it's a convergence of effort. And that's really what we focused on as the effort, the capabilities, not any specific technology. Though we, in fact, did converge technologies into our Catapult environment, which is a cloud environment. Now DHS is actually joining in with us, other parts of DoD, the IC. We've gone into the JWICS environment. We're going into the UNCLAS environment. So it's a cloud infrastructure that's really leveraging other people's cloud infrastructures. We also have a tool set called ANTS, which is a new way to do it, Attack the Network Tool Suite. But what we have found is General Fogarty also said friction is okay. Let me just tell you, if we're going to converge, friction is inevitable. Convergence is painful. It will take some real discipline and an utter commitment to get it done. And we were blessed in our midst of our transformations. We had Lieutenant General J.D. Johnson, who's just recently retired. Anybody work with him? Master of transformation. And we were just blessed to have him there. We now have Lieutenant General Mike Shields has just come on as our new director. And a lot of you know about him. He is a person that knows the technology and its potential. One of the things that drove us and we leveraged was austerity. We used to have just an unlimited spigot of money as long as people were dying in Congress and everybody saw it was important, reported to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and we could need money, we got money. And we just had to cut that way back. But that austerity actually forced us to converge, and the convergence actually speeded us up. We use an agile development process, acquisition process. There's an article coming out in Signal Magazine shortly on lessons learned on rapid acquisition from JIDA. But we now produce and field accredited applications, big data applications, in less than 4 weeks from initial warfighter requirements. I just want you to think about that. Field them on the cloud to be used in combat environment. We ingest new data sources into the environment in less than a week. But the way we do it is a whole of government approach and a focus on people. General Fogarty said it's a convergence of effort. Look, that's a principle of war. Unity of effort, right? That's what I learned as second lieutenant, a million years ago. And I know we had the technology in the 80s to converge. I was involved with the fusion efforts that the Air Force did and a lot of others. We had the technology. We could have converged in the 80s much more than we did. The issue was people. And so as a soldier, as a Marine, as a sailor, as an airman, as an experienced government civilian, what's the secret to a people problem? Leadership. And collaboration and working with your peers and focus on the mission. It's all kind of basic stuff. So I just want to point that, and I'm just thrilled with what's going on in the Center of Excellence. I'm absolutely thrilled when I hear, because behind all of that, and you heard it from General Cardone, you heard it from General Fogarty, you'll hear it from others, it's a leadership rising to the fore, casting a vision, and we just got to suck it up and do it. Okay? The technology is important, and we've leveraged a lot of great technology, big companies, little companies, but it's a people issue. And I want to point to AFCEA. I'm on a cyber committee with AFCEA at the headquarters. We're working and trying to address this rapid acquisition or the cyber implications of speed of acquisition. And we're going to be partnering with every entity we can. But I would just point that AFCEA and venues like it are the way that we're going to collaborate, because you've got to collaborate at a leadership level before you're going to successfully collaborate at a technology level. And, you know, I could go on, but I understand that 3 to 5 minutes does not equal to 8 minutes. So I will go through. I welcome your questions on our pathway to production or the things that we've done. As I said, there's an article coming out that'll go into it. I really thank you for being here. It encourages me to see the enthusiasm, especially of our junior leaders that are here that teach me things and mentor me in a lot of ways when I watch them work. This is how it's going to happen, is us coming together and agreeing that we're going to work together. Not as competitors, even though the resource pie is shrinking, but focused on that common mission. And with that, I'll turn it over to our whole of government representative here.
Thank you. Thank you, General Hernandez, for inviting me. Thank you to AFCEA for having me, and also to the Army Cyber people for welcoming me. Although I'm now here as the DHS representative, I was in DoD for over 20 years working cyber, so my heart's in this mission space for sure. I started as a Navy civilian and then moved up to OSD. And while there, I worked for General Zahner, who I'm sure many of you know, and I got a very heavy dose of Army cyber from him. Back in the fall of 2007, we developed the initial proposal for Cyber Command to take it up to the Vice Joint Staff at the time and do the whole force structure thing. So I got Army background now, having been through that. You can see the impact of convergence everywhere. It's clear that cyber has become an essential operating environment for the full realm of mission execution. And that's true both at DHS as well as in DoD. We need clearly to deepen our understanding of cyber as this global borderless domain that it has the potential insofar as it doesn't have all of the demarcation and the constraints that we're used to working with. On the other hand, you know, it has this opportunity space, but it also doubles as a very significant threat vector. And so it's in that intellectual construct that I began to think about what I would talk today about convergence, since I knew I was going last, and much of what I had wanted to say might already have been said. So a bit of creative thinking here, and I'll raise it up a little more to the strategy level, since that's what I'm doing now. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was the convergence of this as a mission space, both in regard to DoD and DHS working together. I actually bi-weekly have a conference call, 1 week with the DASD for Cyber Policy at OSD, Aaron Hughes, and on the alternating weeks, I speak with the Chief of Staff at U.S. Cybercom, General Brendler, right now. And I do this because I think the two departments are very complementary to one another, and it's important that we stay synced, aligned, converged, if you will, for national security. We try to both our alignment in execution and in strategy. Admiral Rogers, whom I've known for a long time because he was in the Navy Crippy community, as was I, talks a lot about the supported and supporting relationship between our two departments, and I think that concept of convergence is really important in this discussion. I see the same kind of dialogue. At DHS, we put a lot of emphasis on the private sector. When I talk about this, I always say private-public partnership, not the other way around. I think it's important, it sends the right message. We clearly see that in this space, there's no way to work or to be effective than to work closely with the private sector. It's certainly not a domain that's exclusive to the government, and it's essential going forward. Another area of convergence that touches my day is in policy and ops, where they come together. There is a convergence of policy and ops. When I spend several days a week down at the White House with the National Security Council, and you would be amazed at how engaged at that level of government they are and what's happening in operational cyber. Or you may be appalled, I'm not sure, but very heavy interest. The discussions there transcend national strategy right down to how do we execute ops. There are a series of meetings that involve the secretaries of the departments and the deputy secretaries of departments, and decisions are actually being made at that level on how we operate in cyberspace. One of the key things that I'm working on right now is a cyber incident management policy. There's soon going to be a presidential policy directive coming out on that, and that certainly is about the convergence of how the interagency works together in cyber response. But to be sure, it doesn't just stop at government. As soon as this PPD gets signed out, then DHS will have the task of writing the National Cyber Incident Response Plan. And that will talk about who does what in cyber for national well-being should there be a cyber incident. That conversation, I've already started talking to the Council of Governors. I'm already talking to private sector. It definitely involves state, local, tribal, territorial law enforcement. It's going to be really a converged effort. A third area of convergence from my current perspective is in international engagement. And I actually don't like the word international because I think that we probably are post-Westphalia, so it's not only our engagement with nations, but it's with whatever entities there are that hold sway in the global environment. What's interesting is that today when I go to meetings with any of these international engagements, the only topic they want to talk about is cyber. So it really has converged with our global position, the idea of how cyber actually affects our nation in relation to other nations and entities. And I've been working with Interpol, so in the law enforcement world, the same convergence we see. The whole idea behind international cybercrime is all about how do we prosecute this via the new opportunities for law enforcement and cyber. And then the last thing I was going to talk about is just a special case of cyber-physical systems convergence. And I've now come to think of software as the physical capture of intellect. Perhaps this goes back to my days of leading information operations for the Department of Defense. But I really do believe that leadership decisions now are heavily impacted by your experience in the cyber environment. And I think we need to think about the convergence of cognitive and technical as being one that just has just a complete effect on where we're going as a nation. And what comes out of that, too, I was thinking as General Cardone was talking at lunchtime, I felt like sort of a physical instantiation of an artifact because I actually started my career with command and control warfare. And then I went into NIWA, which was the Naval Information Warfare Activity. We then went to information operations, and now I'm doing national policy. So I would also close this by saying there's a convergence of career opportunities in this space.
Very nice.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So let me ask one or two questions to make sure that in the back you have plenty to keep us going. Oh, you're already shaking your heads. Okay, so let me just ask one, and for the panel at large here, and each of you from your view in a wide range of cyber convergence aspects, what are the biggest challenges that our industry and academic partners here could help you with to better enable cyber convergence?
We're going from left. We're going to go from one side to the other.
Whoever's ready.
Let me just say, half my career is from industry. So one of the things that I know, companies work for multiple government organizations. And I know that, usually, at least at the BD level, business development level, they talk to each other about what's going on between the different companies and how, one related to the other. In the old days, and I'll assume it doesn't happen anymore, you'd say, I did this work for Organization A and Organization B wants it, so gosh, we're going to make a lot of money because we already pretty much did the work and we'll globally search and replace and put in a new name and there you go. You know, so there was always a sort of economy of effort as a contractor trying to figure out, you know, how do you do it? How do you improve it? But what I would like to see happen is, number one, companies that are working with different parts of an organization actually help the government converge instead of stovepiping at the contractor level and the government level, which makes it twice as hard for us to do it. And then the second is through organizations like AFCEA. How do you get people that may be at some level competitors, or maybe not, actually to coordinate and synchronize for the good of government and the good of the people as a whole? And so that's what I would like to see, is how do we get the collaboration to help government, which is being hit again and again and again. I mean, the Army, we're losing 56,000 civilians and military right now is what we're looking at. I mean, is that the latest? I mean, I almost am afraid to look under the cover of what it's going to be. So there's less government there to do it. We need to have industry step up and help us synchronize.
There are a couple things, certainly on the materials side. You know, the model that was depicted today by General Fogarty, this unified data, is required and it's powerful, but most of what we bring into our warfighter mission capabilities today are commercial COTS products. We kind of integrate them into a mission capability with our COTS products, and where we struggle the most are wonderful, great capabilities that come with proprietary data standards and formats. We can't get to this unified data construct where all the data that we've got is shareable if COTS technologies don't allow us to pull data and share the data that get generated within that COTS product. And so today in our CPCE, and in fact, the place that this is playing out probably the most prevalent right now is in the DSIG's Army program, where many of the programs they use for whether it's geospatial or tools that provide entity management or intelligence analyst tools oftentimes have great commercial products that are brought to the table, but then they've got these proprietary structures in terms of data access. So I would encourage you, as you're building and providing capabilities for the government, you keep in mind that we do require and will desire and mandate that the data that it generates, uses, or acts upon is not proprietary, is made available for our entire systems to use. The second part of this is workforce development. We augment a lot of our workforce with commercial folks, and as the DoD workforce has been downsized over the last couple of years, this is one space that if there's one area that I lose sleep on, it's probably access to the right people in this area. At Aberdeen Proving Ground today, there are a number of entities that have a role to play in cyberspace, and all of them, to some degree, hires on staff augmentation through contracting support. On the R&D side, we've got CERDEC and ARL SLAD, where much of the technology development occurs. Our Software Engineering Center leverages a significant portion of the workforce from your folks here in the sustainment of our software systems, and they maintain the capabilities from a lifecycle software perspective. Most of the systems, once they're fielded, their ability to remain vigilant against threats are done through the IAVA patching process and updates that are done through the Software Center. And on the PEO staff, obviously, we're looking to build the future capabilities and integrate them. There's a finite number of folks available in this space, from my experience, and we're kind of bouncing them around Aberdeen Proving Ground. And so not only is it challenging, I think, building up the cyber workforce on the military side, on the civilian side, once they get those skills, it's very hard to hold on to them. So I'd like to have a conversation at some point with you in terms of what your strategies are in your environment to attract, retain, and grow the talent in the cyberspace, because I think it's going to be one of our biggest challenges. And then I mentioned earlier our ComSec revitalization program, modernization. I mean, we've got a major challenge on ComSec across the entire Army. It's going to have to be modernized, and still struggling right now with regards to whether we've got a plan in place that can actually do that quickly at an affordable cost. Some of you are in that space. If you've got some ideas, I'd love to hear from you.
I'll highlight 3 areas, really school-specific. The first, obviously, is a training environment and range access. Although I would offer that we're probably not interested in school-specific solutions, but rather things that the operational force are doing are important to us and also inform how we would equip an individual training environment and look at that. So platforms that are common to the operational force or clearly linked are important to us. The second, related, as we look at the challenge of training our own tool developers, as I think both General Fogarty and General Cardone highlighted today, infrastructure that supports not just curriculum for developers, but allows them to work in the space as well. So again, that commonality with the operational force. And then a third area, which is completely unrelated to those, but is common to the workforce development, are things that enable individual talent management. A mandate to do things differently here with the cyber branch is an example for the rest of the Army. And while we're used to managing on people looking the same, I think it's the differentiation of skills that also allow us to place the right people with the right training, the right education, and the right skill sets in the right places in the operational force. And so that's a combination of a personnel record, a training record, a classified training record, an operational history, and we haven't seen a lot of things that enable that, because it's not as simple as HRC does FACES and we do policy. So looking at that, I've seen something, ForceCom G2 manages their intel soldiers in a certain way to give them visibility across the force. So actually on the personnel management side, we're open to some good ideas on how private sector manages their workforce.
From a DHS perspective, one of the key things that we're looking at right now with industry is actually a little different than what's been talked about, but it's about cyber threat indicator sharing. Our secretary just recently made a statement that was quite remarkable. He said that cybersecurity is now as important to the Department of Homeland Security as CT, and if you know that we're a department built on counterterrorism, that's pretty remarkable. So we've worked pretty closely, but need to expand at a much greater rate the cyber threat indicator sharing with all of your companies. You have global nets, you see all of these threat indicators, and the sooner that we can bring all that information in and then redistribute it out for critical infrastructure, the better.
Okay, very good. We're ready for the big voice questions.
Okay, sir, question number 1 is for Mr. Martin. We heard this morning about soldiers and their leaders fighting the network itself, vice leveraging the network to better accomplish their mission. Do you agree with this idea, and if so, how are you measuring progress in solving this problem?
No, I think there's a degree of truth to that statement. And I think part of this is the complexity of the network and the limited signal assets that are available within the BCT today. If you just take a look at, we started fielding Winty Inc. 2 a couple years ago, and if you compare a Winty Inc. 1 unit to Winty Inc. 2 unit, it's almost an order of magnitude increase in the number of nodes that we put out inside of BCT. Didn't add any soldiers, but added mobility and complexity and a variety of other things that they didn't have with their Winty Inc. 1 system. So I do believe that today they're fighting the network. And I don't mean that the network isn't adding value for them. I think it's very few of them would want to turn it in. But part of the challenge that we have is really how do you take what we've given them and make the operation and initialization of the network much easier so they can spend their limited assets and resources on fighting the network and defending it. And I think right now they're just overcumbered with just getting it up and running and keep it running, my opinion, two months into the job.
Okay. The next question is, land, air, sea, and cyberspace. As a differently dimensioned battlefront, How much has DoD leadership discussed creating a new converged service component?
Colonel Buckner?
I can talk about that from when I was on the OSD staff, so 3 years old, but there was actually quite a good bit of discussion about it at the time, as there was also quite a good bit of discussion about whether Cyber Command should be a subunified command or a full-up command. In the end, the pragmatic issues kind of went out. The appetite of the Hill for creating change has a large effect at that level, at the OSD decision-making level. And then, of course, senior leaders get together and, decide that in general, on average, given all of the input, we'll go with a certain course of action.
If I can, let me just say, I think that we're actually asking the wrong question. I mean, of course you're going to bend things different ways. This is just a basic way that you do critical thinking. I mean, yes, doctrinally we have to separate things because we've got to break budgets down into manageable pieces that people are going to have authority over. So, you're not going to give somebody a unified budget of X amount and expect them to actually operationalize it. So we're going to have hierarchy. We're going to have functional decomposition of tasks. But what I think we really need to look to is our young leaders being adaptive in their thinking and having multiple paradigms that they can use to look at a problem. If you look at a problem one way, the enemy is going to eat your lunch. And I can tell you, looking at what the ISIS or the Caliphate or whatever you want to call it does, they shift smoothly from, what we would call coin to conventional operations, to propaganda operations, to looking at it from a religious economic context. What they're demonstrating is a mental flexibility to be able to shift for effects, and I think we need to do that. And, I think we get into theological debates about how we're going to bend things up, and I think we need to accept that in some cases, different models are appropriate to solve different parts of the problem. So I just throw that out. I know that's counter to, probably somebody's going to talk to me after that I violated doctrine somehow by suggesting that there might be more than one way to think of things, but I think that we're going to have to do that to win in this new environment.
So I would offer my 2 cents on this in that it may be a natural evolution of cyber convergence, but I think as General Cardone talked at lunch, and you're seeing that from core and below cyber support, you start to learn what's possible there. As other things converge, you'll really determine whether or not that makes sense in the future. But today, we're all really wrestling with 2 domains: land cyber, sea cyber, air cyber. Clearly to joint standards, but over time, there'll be more collaboration and more convergence, and then I think we'll know the answer, and we ought not rush to that too quickly.
Yeah, let me give an example real quick. In my field right now, IEDs. What is the difference between an IED, a landmine, and an explosive remnant of war if you step on it? Okay? But doctrinally in the federal government, the question of, demining, humanitarian demining, that's State Department, and that's, got a big fence around it. IEDs, JIADA was formed because we had to have JIADA do that. EOD is explosive remnants of war, and dealing with ordnance left on the battlefield. But if we go too rigorously with that binning, we don't share solutions and we can't converge.
Next question.
Okay, sir. Next question. How do we maintain this common Army vision of convergence through implementation as senior leaders change and bring with them new experiences and visions of what Army cyber should look like?
I think that's always a risk, particularly in the environment that we're in today with constrained resources and so forth. But what I would suggest is speed is probably our friend. So the diagram that General Fogarty painted today, at least as one construct. As he pointed out, some of these things we can do today. Of course, if we talk about them for a long time and wait a year or two, then probably we'll be facing new leaders, new decisions, and new constructs. So I think speed is the essence of maintaining momentum, and I think we'll see some of this stuff. We're trying to get, at least from the material development side, as much of this pushed out as we can. COE 1.0, looking for a fielding hopefully next year. Transport convergence. I mean, we can start doing some of these things today. We've proven that it's technically feasible. It'll take a decision to move forward with it, but I think the tools are here to do this. We just need to move quickly, would be my recommendation.
I would also highlight that convergence, as outlined this morning, is not an end state, but rather a goal that we continually move towards. And the Army vision is firmly nested within this joint vision, which is right for the department, which is right for the nation, and I feel like there's a lot of movement and flexibility within that space to continually adapt to adversary, to environment, to capabilities, and things like that. So the path that we are on, while we may change some specifics to it, I think is right. Army, joint department, and nation. And to just relate it to the last question, perhaps the next step, not another service, but perhaps the next step is Cybercom as a unified command, so that there is a unifying force across the services, because all of the services today are building cyber forces that are certainly both service-specific and service joint need, but the priority of that can shift based on service leadership. So Cybercom as a unified command in a SOCOM-like structure does provide a unified vision to have service efforts be complementary towards this larger build.
Okay, the next question. We talk a lot about cyber convergence and the importance of the private sector in this problem. So my question is, what is the government doing to make it easier for industry to approach government with their capabilities, situational awareness, and lessons learned?
Yeah, it's probably targeted at me from the material development side. I would tell you that certainly venues like today help. You know, I don't think we have enough communications that we could see everything going on within industry that's available. But I would tell you that in the short time that I've been here, I've certainly had most of you have reached out to have a conversation. And so I think a lot of this is awareness of what is available. On our side, clearly we have to be very clear in terms of what direction we're taking, what decision points will be, and when those decisions are going to be made. For things like COE, I mean, we talked this morning, or General Fogarty mentioned this morning, that it really is a coalition of the willing. COE is a partnership between, at least from the command post computing environment, PEO IWS and POC3T. We leverage the support from both the Software Center and CERDEC, and both of those venues have offered industry the opportunity to come in, and if they've got capability and tools to bring in, that there's a venue for them to participate. And there are frequent industry days for folks to come in and play. So that certainly is going to be part of it. We've got our APBI, which is our annual contracting opportunities. That's a great venue to have conversations. That'll be in the late October timeframe at Aberdeen Proving Ground. So certainly be on the lookout for that. It'll be published on the FedBiz Ops, but certainly conversation is part of the answer.
Yeah, let me give an example of something that works. Okay, we have integrators that are supporting us at JIDA. What I see is increased collaboration from the senior leadership of the integrators and among the different companies. And the more they collaborate, they actually are they have done what I asked what industry could do to help, in that we now have relationships with DHS, for example. DHS has MIPR'd us money. We're working on common problems. But the initial bringing together or identification of the requirements or the opportunities was vendor-driven, industry-driven, under contract, everything acquisition, clean, lawyers I walk with the lawyers every day. I go for a walk, sort of like, with my consigliere. So I think the part of it is to look to yourselves in organizations like AFCEA, and as you collaborate better together, you can help government collaborate with you better. Does that make sense? Does anybody, I'd be interested if you can go through the email and push back on it if you don't see that's true, but I've seen it work. I think, look at the leadership we have here and the engagement of the senior Army cyber leadership at this event. It is much better than it has been, in the past at times in terms of how they're actually engaging. And, we've got senior leadership here from DHS. That's great, right? No nods, no amens. Okay, all right. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I would add two comments to it. The first is that that level of coordination and public-private partnership work is really a DoD priority. If you look at the new DoD cyber strategy, clearly talks to now objectives tied to that to enhance these relationships. And second, the establishment of the DIUX. The Defense Innovation Unit Experimental tells you from the Secretary of Defense standpoint, we're looking very hard at reestablishing relationships with industry partners, looking hard to find ways to bring in new and emerging technologies, and really working together in a way that says, hey, this is a priority for us. And we're seeing other government agencies looking to become a part of that.
If I could have one bumper sticker opportunity, because General Fogarty recognized that same challenge and turned to the staff to, and our other centers of excellence, which host some similar industry center of excellence venues for industry partners to demonstrate where they might fit in and integrate, as the panel members have said here. So I think the first iteration, perhaps small scale this year, but looking to build upon it, CyberQuest. We do have our seated leadership, Colonel Tawala Mathis here, as well as our TRADOC capability managers and our new Cyber Battle Lab. So they are putting together just that type of venue where, all good ideas and capabilities welcome. And I think that's kind of something that we're working towards to break down that barrier and make it easier.
I'm going to bring up something that I've actually suggested at prior AFCEA events and venues, is what can industry do to make it easier for us to understand and compare capabilities? Give you an example. I walk into an exhibit hall and it's just like a green field. I have no idea what I'm going to see till I walk in. Why can't I have something where I search for capabilities or put in things I'm looking for before I arrive at an event, and then somehow have a way of communicating with the vendors and saying, I'm interested in this capability, you say you have it, I'm going to be there Tuesday, can you have somebody who actually can talk to me about the capability? Y'all, raise your hand, how many people have Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma folks and whatever in your organizations? Wow, it must be dying out. There's only like 3 or 4, okay. Continual process improvement, anybody? Gosh, we're not getting better, are we? Okay. Why can't industry get together and look at it in terms of how you improve the way you present your capabilities to government to make it easier for us to understand and quickly compare so that we can select what's right for us? Just a thought. Wouldn't that be easy for you?
Sir, that concludes the questions. I think we're out of time, so. Perfect.
So that was our final question. Please hold your applause as we welcome Lieutenant General Bob Wood back to the stage. Thank him on behalf of AFCEA and our audience for the panel members.
Please give him a hand. Thanks, Jim, for that challenge at the end, and Rhett for shepherding the ideas and discussion as it took place this afternoon. As promised, new insights, new ideas, an industry perspective, and frankly, the schoolhouse and the branch itself perspective that gave us a good understanding of how it's being perceived, this convergence idea. And to Department of Homeland Security, appreciate not only your OST background and experience and Army and Navy experience, thanks for putting a period on a lot of what we were talking about. We are now going to, on behalf of this panel, we'll make a presentation to the Wounded Warriors Foundation and be happy to do that on behalf of all of them today. I'd like to, at this point, point out what we're doing for the rest of the afternoon. 4 to 5 this afternoon, we're going to have a first set of track sessions, and the track sessions are listed over here. Concurrent sessions, you can see 3 tracks. That'll be back in the row behind us here, the classrooms to the rear. And we have 3 tracks that'll be proceeding, and then also at 4 o'clock, we have an engagement theater conducted by the AFCEA chapter titled, This is Personal, focusing on how to coexist with the Internet of Everything and an always-on society. So 4 activities, 1 on the exhibit floor, 3 at the row behind us, 1 level back for our tracks. And again, reminder that 5 o'clock on the exhibit floor, we will have an opportunity to meet with the leaders of the Cyber Center of Excellence and others that are here, brought here by General Fogarty and General Cardone. That'll be a great opportunity to interface with those leaders on the floor, have a chance as well to enjoy the reception. I'll see you at the reception. This is the last event in this setting here. We'll see you in the morning, and thank you for your attendance. Please, instruction, tracks, theaters, you name it, it's happening, and then the reception at the end of the day to put a cap on a fine afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the plenary space today.
We would like to thank you for attending today and hope that this conference will be a premier professional development event for you.